still joining, so I'm going to give it another couple of minutes. But the beginning of the agenda is basically opening remarks from Dario Liguti and myself. I've just blurred my background. I think you can probably only see the slides, but I realized my messy office was showing, so I've blurred the background. Okay, I think we're starting to get close to a stable number in the audience, so we'll carry on with the program. Our first speaker is Dario Liguti, who is Director of the Sustainable Energy Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, but with a global scope of work. Dario and his colleagues Charlotte Griffiths, Harry Tulsidas, and Nadezhda Karmlakova, as well as Nick McGuinness from DEFRA, have been very supportive in setting up our ICESRM. Dario and his UNECE division provide a global multilateral platform and to facilitate greater economic integration and cooperation and support the energy transition, climate change mitigation, and adaptation through specific and results-oriented actions. So Dario, I'd like to invite you now to share your slides.
Sure, thank you, Julian. Yeah. Thank you for introducing me and for giving me this opportunity to address colleagues. Yeah, as you said, let me share a small presentation that I have. Hopefully, do you see it?
I do, yes. I hope everyone else does.
Okay, that's excellent. So let's go. So good morning to all of you, and welcome, of course, from my side to this very interesting and very important webinar. A number of series of webinars that we've been having through the ICSRM of the UK. So let me move. So why is this this is important, and why actually we in the energy division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, which is a part of the UN Secretariat, is one of the 5 regional commissions. We cover 56 member states, the whole of North America, and the enlarged Europe, the ex-Soviet Union, Turkey, and Israel. Which equates to about 1/3 of the world GDP and about 34% of the world greenhouse gas emissions. We do here in the division with the team, we cover the full energy value chain from fuel resources, energy resources, all the way down to energy services. And of course, we do look at minerals, particularly those minerals which are critical for the energy transition, whether it's for renewable energy equipment or whether it's for digital equipment or whatever. And you know that when you talk about resource management, when you talk about resources, there is obviously the issue around their impact on the environment, their impact around their sustainability. And the previous energy paradigm, which we're still living in, but we're trying to transit out, is okay, great. We don't want to repeat the errors that we did in the past. And that is the reason now, as we accelerate into the energy transition towards the new energy paradigm, it's very important that we learn from the past experiences. We don't do the same errors, and we look at issues like establishing a circular economy, issues such as sustainable resource management from an environmental and social perspective. Here on this slide, you see a number of issues that are dear, that all of you know, of course, when looking at resource management and what are the relevant aspects that we actually deal through the ICSRM in the UK, but as well through the group of experts on resource management that Charlotte and Julia belongs to, but as well that Charlotte leads and works throughout the globe. Now, and so what do we do basically? And what is the reason? That's the reason why we have an ICSRM in the UK. Well, for many decades, we've been working in how can we make resource management more sustainable? It has an impact on the environment. It has an impact on society. But how can we mitigate those impacts? How can we actually make those activities as sustainable as possible? And this is a very important point. It's so important that the UN Secretary General actually last year launched a high-level critical energy transition minerals panel that issued what is called what were the principles and recommendations, which very much give a political visibility to the work that we've been doing for many decades on this part, which is actually, it looks at two main things. The first one is classification of existing reserves and deposits, and that's the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources. That is a tool, an international language to classify deposits and reserves, and you will hear a lot more about that throughout the webinar, according to economic and financial and technical viability, of course, but as well environmental and social aspects. And this is the only classification methodology in the world that can be applied to every commodity or every mineral or every energy source or project that you're thinking of. B, that can be applied at different stages of the project lifestyle, whether you look in exploration, extraction, refining, processing, recycling, etc. And C, that you actually is cross-country. So if you look at these specific projects in country A, they can be compared with country B. And that is the great value of this tool, because it allows to aggregate, it allows to compare apples with pears, and it allows for people to have a clear idea along this embedded the criteria that I just mentioned before, which makes this tool unique, because it's all of them are part of making a project viable or not. It's not just one or the other, it's actually all of them are actually part of the viability of a project. It is an important tool. It is a global tool. In fact, it has been adopted by the EU in the Euro Critical Raw Materials Act and has been deployed in national legislations of the EU 27 member states. It has been adopted by the African Union and is progressively being adopted by the African Union members in their national legislation. It has been adopted by many countries. Ukraine, for example, we came back from Armenia, where we just launched an ICSRM in Armenia, which will work on diffusing, on disseminating UNFC in Armenia for mining operations. And then the second aspect, which is mentioned, is the UNRMS, which is the United Nations Resource Management System. So once you have taken the decision to invest, whatever that project is, in a viable project, which is classified as viable, then you want to have a methodology that says, what do you do? How do you do that? How do you make sure that all the different aspects are actually taken into consideration when actually implementing that project? And so I was saying about the ICSRMs, we actually have a network, and the UK is a very important part of this network. It's actually a unique element in this network because it's constituted by 4 universities and the British Geological Survey, and they are and the activities that this ICSRM in the UK does is top-notch. It's very high level research on issues such as the circular economy, in construction material and technology, metals, etc., etc. Some of the other ICSRMs that you can see here, they are different. They are obviously they address the local issues. For example, if you take the one in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is based in Mexico, they look at, for example, renewable energy projects. They look as well at traditional sources of energy. If you look at, for example, the one in Central Asia, based in Kazakhstan, in Almaty in Kazakhstan, they actually look at critical minerals for the energy transition, but as well traditional sources of energy. I mentioned the one we just came back from Armenia, which will be looking at mining, in particularly gold, copper, molybdenum, because that's what the country is rich with. The one in the EU, which is based in Ljubljana, Slovenia, actually is helping the implementation of UNECE in training members of the Geological Service of the EU, 27 member states, and members from outside of strategic partnership countries as well in UNECE, so as to facilitate investments from investors for the European Union in new projects in the European Union and outside, and as well trade between countries on these minerals. So what do these ICSRMs do? And this in particular, having a look at the UK, they are fundamentally a platform for cooperation. They are open to all of the stakeholders that have a role, that have an interest in this area. So the governments, local administrations, civil society, private sector, of course, academia, as in the case of the ICSRM UK, and so they facilitate and they have belonging to a network. They exchange best practices, they support each other, they help each other, they create training opportunities, they do capacity building in the countries, in the regions where they are based, to all of those stakeholders who have a role in making sure that resource management is sustainable. Particularly, as I mentioned before, the UK one has a focus on the circular and resource efficient economy, in line with the ambitions of the UK government to turn the UK into the first completely circular economy in the world, and so that's where they focus in. But everything which you will learn today has global relevance, can be used elsewhere. In fact, the ICSRM UK is already in contact with a number of prospective centers. As you have seen before, there are requests to establish these centers in China, in Southeast Asia, in India, in Africa, in Cuba, in other places, in Germany, etc. And so they're already in contact, as I was saying, with some of them, particularly in supporting them on they're looking at how to establish a circular economy, data, a database, and the process of the policies necessary for that. And I think with that, Julia, I think I try to be very synthetic. You and the other universities are doing great work. So I'm sure my presentation was not at the level of what the work that you guys do. But certainly I'll try to give an overall background view on it, and I'll be happy. My colleagues are online. I'll be happy to answer any questions I may have. And with that, thank you, and I give back the floor to you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dario, for that excellent introduction to the ICE SRMs in general, and also for clarifying the way that we are special in focusing on circular economy rather than on particular primary resource streams. So I think it's also clear that within this framework, UCL is particularly focusing on construction minerals, and we're collaborating with other organizations specialized in different areas. So Exeter and BGS are focusing on technical metals and critical minerals, Brunel on aluminium, and Swansea for steel. Some of you may have already attended webinars by Exeter and Brunel, and I think there's an upcoming one led by Swansea, and I think Kim is in the audience, so later on at the end, perhaps you can tell us when that's planned for, Kim. Yeah, Dario explained that the objective of the ICE-SRMs is to support the United Nations Resource Management System and the UNFC. And I now want to tell you a bit more about these because I know some of you may have that background already, but I think there are also plenty of people in the audience who are not that familiar. Also, it's kind of necessary background for some of the presentations. So the UNRMS was developed to support achievement of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which I think you probably are all familiar with. It has 12 principles which start with responsibility of the state for governing resource management, and it acknowledges collective responsibility to the planet and the fact that resource management must be an integrated system that has social benefits. There's an emphasis on service orientation or servitization, which is a key mechanism of incentivizing product durability and material reuse in a circular economy by selling materials and products as a service, for example, through leasing. Comprehensive resource recovery refers to the fact that the value of all materials, including waste, should be recognized, and they should be used at highest value, including realization of environmental and social value as well as economic value. So in fact, circular economy is intrinsic to the United Nations Resource Management System, but we are especially focusing on that. And the 12 principles recognize that worker health and safety is a special social benefit in resource extraction. Innovation must be embraced to be able to implement the 12 principles, and there must be transparency of transactions for public information and an overall best value outcome. As with the Sustainable Development Goals, continuous improvement is a key principle. If you look at the document, I think Dario showed the thumbnail of what the document looks like, and you can easily obtain it by searching. You'll find that the principles are broken down into 55 requirements, and that's one of the things that is going to come out in our webinar. So the next question is, what is the UNFC? So the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources is at the heart of the UNRMS. It's a project-based and principles-based resource classification system for defining the environmental and socioeconomic viability and technical feasibility of projects to develop resources. In fact, resource classification systems already exist in many regions as provision of consistent and transparent information regarding resource extraction projects has always been a concern. So most of this was in the past for primary resources. Development of the UNFC has tried to harmonize these methods to provide a classification system that is transparent, consistent, and gives comparable information for resource recovery on a global basis. It also builds on the existing methods for better accounting of the environmental and social sustainability of resource recovery, and that is, of course, for us a very key point. And Dario already said it, we have to have comparability between environmental and social impacts for development projects around the world. So why do we need the UNFC? It's been developed as a harmonized, consistent, and replicable approach to provide transparent information for decision-making by stakeholders, and that includes developers of resource extraction projects, which might include waste generators, to help identify, evaluate, and compare resource recovery opportunities. It's also directed at investors who are interested in whether they can make money under an acceptable amount of risk, and increasingly may be interested in green investment, which considers more than just the financial benefits of investments. And in further development of the UNFC, a key aspect is considering stakeholders beyond the developers and investors who derive a direct financial benefit from resource recovery. So that might be communities who have project benefits for their communities, such as employment and improvements in infrastructure, but they may also be worried about pollution and social impacts, such as corruption or changes to their way of life. And also governments who are interested in regulatory compliance, but also national accounting of resources for the purposes of planning and development of policy. So when we say that the UNFC is project-based, it means that the framework is intended to be applicable to classification of the commercial viability of recovery projects for any resource. An important aspect of the development of the UNFC was a specification for the application of the UNFC to anthropogenic resources in 2018. So it's applicable to the recovery of secondary as well as primary resources. And some of the work that is going on in the Horizon Europe Futurum project is to consider how, led by LMU, I think Soraya might be in the audience here, is to consider how the UNFC might be applicable to national accounting of resources. And when we say that the UNFC is principle based, it refers to the fact that the principles of classification are embedded in a three-dimensional system, and which we show conceptually here as this diagram with three axes of where we have the E-axis for environmental and socioeconomic viability, F for technical feasibility, and G for the degree of confidence in the estimates of resource concentrations. Each of the little boxes represents a potential outcome of the classification of a project as being commercially viable, but considering all aspects of sustainability. Okay, so we'll move on to the agenda, which consists of 5 talks. And first of all, we're lucky to have a guest speaker from the Finnish Environment Institute, Nylen, who's visiting UCL at the moment, followed by Aleyna Prokudina, who's policy advisor in the Policy Impact Unit of the UCL Department for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Public Policy, and that she's going to speak a bit about some of the support she provided to our UKRI-funded Circular Economy Centre for Construction Minerals. And then we have 3 UCL researchers who are currently doing projects or finishing projects related to the ICE-SRM circular economy. We have a PhD student, Zhang, who did a placement with the UNECE, and Futurum researcher and PhD student Jonas Breidenbach, and my colleague, Dr. Stijn van Ewijk. So each of the speakers will successively share their slides from their computer, and we will take questions in the chat for discussion after all the speakers have finished. So with that, I'd like to introduce Nylen, who is an environmental policy researcher at the Finnish Environment Institute and has worked with circular economy policy around topics such as nutrient recycling, circular construction, and wastewater treatment. And he's got a variety of good papers on policy process and ideas, sustainability transitions, and innovation policy. So I guess with that, Erkki, if you can please share your slides, and then just, I mean, we'll have a brief transition between each of the speakers, but we'll just go, you won't see anything from me again until the end of the, at the end of the 5 presentations. Erkki, are you ready to go? No.
I'm ready to go, and thank you for this opportunity to speak in this wonderful occasion, and also giving such a nice presentation of me. So what I'm here to talk about is incentivizing sustainable and circular construction in Finland. All right. So to begin with, well, the built environment has quite a lot of potential to improve in terms of sustainability. European Commission estimates that built environment consumes around 50% of all extracted materials, and the construction sector that generates around 35% of wastes. So one way to add more sustainability to built environment is through using more wood in construction and also through circularity practices. The wood can help as it can act as a carbon sink and can also cut climate emissions. And circularity practices, in turn, they can help to reduce waste and resource extraction. But in both cases, their introduction needs facilitation through policies. And what I'm here to talk about is I'll give you a couple of examples of those policies in Finland. I'll start up with a bad example, which is the wood construction policy in Finland that, well, has quite little to show for. As for the context, Finland is a country that has quite a lot of area, really a lot of forests and quite a few people. So we have population of 5.5 million and around 30% of that lives in the capital Helsinki area. And because we have so much forest, that also means that the forest sector is quite important to Finnish economy, but the building from wood is quite niche. The wood has been a traditional building material, but since 16 the concrete has taken over. But still there has been quite strong sentiments towards using wood in construction, and clearest example of that is that the promotion of wood construction has been a policy objective in each government program since 1995. That policy has produced a long list of different policy programs, but the results of the policy have been quite poor. Around 200 wooden multi-story residential buildings have been built in 30 years of policy. And the usual number of multi-story residential buildings built per year is around 20 to 20,000. So why this is important is because the building companies make most of their profits through multi-story buildings. And that also has been a topic of investigative journalism in the Finnish BBC as well. What we did in this, we analyzed the policy mix of the wood construction policy. So basically we analyzed the objectives, plans, and used instruments over the timeline of the policy. And ideally, the policy mix should consist of sequential actions that build on previous efforts and contribute in iterative and coherent manner to achieve the desired objectives. So here's the illustration of the policy mix and the timeline of wood construction policy. So the policy was basically started in 1995. It had a quite strong start because it was started as one of the measures to recover mechanical forest sector, which was hit really hard by early 90s economic recession in Finland. So basically there was Finnish technical agencies initiated a program called technology program for wood construction. It had 33 million euros budget and it funded almost 140 project development wood construction. But after that, there was quite a drop-off because then the policy started to rely only on communications campaigns and networking measures for many years. In 2004, there was two policy programs, but the focus in that time was moved away from the multi-story building as it focused more on this sort of low-rise and dense urban wooden districts. During this time, there were around 15 pilot areas of that type of districts, but also there was a investment to the education. So 2 new professorships for wood construction was started, and also PhD program. Around 2009 and 2010, the forest sector was once again a bit in trouble because the demand for paper had been plummeting, and usually during that time there's a quite strong talk about that there should be more innovative ways to use wood. So one that brought the multi-story wooden buildings back onto the focus as well. And also what was special in that time was that they also started to lobby municipalities kind of build and zone more wooden buildings. But in 2016, the wood construction was integrated as a solution for climate policy, and that brought again more resources to the policy, and around 13.5 million euros budget, and that was used to initiate 110 projects, and also the program had also external employees of 4. So a bit of conclusions of the wood construction policy in Finland. As I said, it had a quite strong start, but the follow-up was quite inefficient. The policy goal was consistent over the 30 years, which is important when you try to develop things, but the policy lacked severely funds and human resources. Also, the funding on pilots and projects mobilized actors to develop wood construction, but where it failed, it did not initiate upscaling. Next, I'll move to a better example, which is a case of plot handover competition for circular economy apartment building. So in Finland, cities and municipalities, they have zoning monopoly. They are also significant owners of the land. And if they want to promote such things as the circular construction, they have a suitable policy instrument at their disposal, and that is the plot handover procedure. Through it, municipalities can assign building plots for construction companies. The procedure has a latitude. It's not strictly regulated, so it can be used to meet local housing, economic, or environmental policy goals. And it also enables local authority to give quite specific building requirements for the plots. So in the summer of 2020, the city of Tampere utilized the plot handover in a novel way. They used it as a thematic concept competition for a circular economic residential building for the building companies. So basically, companies had 1 month to draft and submit their building concepts. The competition got in total 17 submissions, which meant that basically that all active and capable companies participated in this competition. After the competition, it led to a national working group, which developed the competition criteria for the purpose of broader use. So the competition criteria relied on qualitative criteria. So there was no quantitative criteria or minimum requirements, and the winner was decided through scoring. So what they did assess was first the degree or refinement of the circular economy solutions. So for example, the reuse of old steel beams was valued higher than the usage of steel beams made out of recycled steel. They also assessed the kind of the novelty value of the solution and ambition levels of the circular economy solutions used in the concept. Then the results of our analysis. First, the competition criteria, it operationalized the circular economy in a fruitful manner for the companies. So basically, companies got a better grasp of what the circular economy could mean in construction, but also the criteria was loose enough to provide room for different solutions. So basically, kind of if it was seen from the city that if there would have been strict criteria, that was thought to inhibit innovations. The value of the plot was the main factor why the companies participated to the competition. It was in a prime location in the city, and it was in the publicly owned land, which basically meant significantly lower acquisition costs. And so basically the plot provided the companies with slightly larger profit margins, which they gave them an opportunity to do more than usual with their concept drafting. So with the competitions, the city basically provided the companies an opportunity to make a business case for circular building. So it kind of, the competition covered the companies from the kind of the normal market pressures of the construction markets. So basically companies drafted their circular economy solution with their own risk assignment, and this work included development of circular economy solution and figuring out the supply chains for them. And also if the companies had some gaps in knowledge and expertise, they filled it with partner acquisition that usually meant consultants. So, and also in multiple interviews, it came up that the timing seemed to be right. So there has been kind of circular construction projects in the past. So the next natural step would be making a business case for such building. And as finally, some takeaways. So how to incentivize sustainable built environment? Usually the carrots and sticks are talked about. So carrots are basically like project funding, pilot funding for pilot projects, and this sort of competitions that I talked about earlier. Sticks usually mean regulation and taxes. And the sticks are usually thought as that, well, they can be a lot more efficient than the carrots, but the problem with them is that they require quite robust political backing, and that's not always available. So that can leave the situation in such state that kind of policymakers and whoever wants to promote it needs to be quite innovative with the carrots. And the second takeaway, especially deriving from the wood construction policy, is that avoid basically policy mess. So one thing that could help is that some actors or some institution has a proper ownership of the policy. So basically it could carry the policy objective better throughout the policy cycles, and there would be an assessment of the situation where the development is going time to time, and there would be an outline what the policy meeting the policy objective would mean as well. Yes, thank you for this opportunity again, and if you want to get in touch, please, here's my email as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erkki. That was really interesting, and it's an example I haven't really seen in that kind of way before, so hopefully we can just have some time to discuss it. I think we are running behind time, which I think is at least partly my fault. So if the speakers please could take care to keep to their 10 minutes. Aleyna, are you able to share your screen?
Yes, hi Julia, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to meet everyone. I'm Aleyna. I'm a policy advisor at the Policy Impact Unit. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the PIU, we are a team of policy engagement specialists. We're based within the Department of Science, Technology, Engineering and Public Policy at University College London, but we work with researchers and academic teams all across the Faculty of Engineering Sciences to design policy engagement strategies, but also increase the use of research in the policy making process. Now that spiel is over, as Julia kind of mentioned at the start, my goal today is to give you a brief overview, but also a whistle-stop tour of some of the policy impact and some of the work that's been delivered as part of the UKRI Circular Economy Centre for Mineral-Based Construction Materials, or ICEC MCM. So I'm going to do a little bit of that, but I think just to keep in mind as to like why we're doing this, policy engagement, especially from the academic side, is really important. It helps to ensure that the decisions that kind of shape all of our lives are informed by the best possible decisions and the best possible evidence, and also ensure that that amazing research that is produced by academic institutions doesn't just stay behind an academic paywall, but it continues to shape and impact policy. So just a little bit about the ICEC MCM, for those of you who might not have heard about it before. I think someone's mic might be on. Yeah, okay. So the ICEC MCM is a research centre that's led by University College London, together with 5 other UK universities and the British Geological Society. It's a really interdisciplinary team. It has people from across kind of engineering, geology, accountancy and law. And the main aim is to remove the barriers and develop solutions for a transition to a circular economy. So why does that matter? Well, construction materials are the largest resource flow both in the UK and globally. I've read some kind of absurd statistic this morning, actually, that construction was responsible, not only being the largest consumer of natural resources, but also accounting for about 40% of total energy consumption globally, and about 60% of the UK's waste. So there's a real impetus there to reduce not only how much materials we use, but actually energy, and using these materials far more effectively than currently is if we are trying to achieve a circular economy and reach net zero. And that's really that was really the goal of ICEC MCM. There were kind of 3 challenges which Julia mentioned at the beginning, looking at the stocks and flows of materials, so the kind of materials that are already in our economy and how we can use them better. Also looking at how we can sort of create the market for support and adoption of circular economy materials and technologies. And also the second challenge was around developing kind of life cycle stages of each construction materials and seeing how we can reduce their demand, enable their circularity, and also create kind of economic value so that for businesses. So as kind of mentioned by Julia and also Dario at the start, I think the main kind of aim of the ICEC MCM has really been around identifying and addressing systemic barriers to the implementation of a circular economy, and also using academic expertise to develop enablers and solutions that can support industry and government. How have we kind of done that? So just a couple of examples of some of the practical solutions that have been developed in response to policy problems. So one of the issues that was identified is the lack of data available for material resource use in the construction sector. So if we don't understand how many materials are flowing through our economy, it's actually really difficult to understand how many are wasted or recovered, and how many are already in our building stock. So as part of the ICEC MCM, researchers developed a new Bayesian material flow analysis, or an MFA, which can bridge some of these data gaps and can show 100% of the picture with as little as 20% of data. And we hope that this kind of model can be applicable to not just the construction sector, but actually the wider economy and other resource streams in the future. Second issue that was identified was around design for end of life. And again, caveat, this isn't an exhaustive list. These are just a couple of the examples. For a kind of fuller picture of everything that the ICEC has produced, you can find resources on the web page and their website. But in terms of design for end of life, some of you may know that there's currently no mandatory requirement to design buildings for the end of their life, and therefore there's actually little incentive for clients or design teams to consider how these buildings will be managed once they reach the end of their life cycle, and also how the design and choice of materials may affect this. So again, in response to this, ISEC MCM researchers demonstrated that it is possible to design kind of different structures that can be deconstructed and reused at the end of their life cycle using current technologies. We hope that this kind of work can support enhanced policies in the future, and having kind of tighter requirements on end-of-life plans and design for deconstruction, which can support a circular economy and also net zero in the built environment. And lastly, another example. This one's around how can we actually design out waste. Currently, approximately 30 million tonnes of waste is produced annually from new builds, but it can be prevented. And one of the goals of ISEC has been to look at how can we reduce all avoidable waste in the built environment. And much of this comes down to, well, can we see how we can prevent some of this happening earlier in the design phase? Can some of those really early decisions which impact how our buildings are constructed and then dismantled and then discarded, how can they shape waste prevention? So something that again, in response to this, ISEC researchers did some applied research with the National Highways here in the UK to design some eco design principles. Again, we can look at how to design out waste through things like design decisions, whether over-ordering or packaging or handling and storage of materials. And we hope that in the future, eco-design principles can provide a kind of a more comprehensive framework for policy and regulations to ensure more efficient use of materials. But just as a kind of whistle-stop tour again of what are some of the kind of policy impacts that were achieved as part of the centre over the past 4 years, and what does policy engagement actually look like in practice? Well, we in total responded to 21 government consultations and calls for evidence. We produced 24 research publications, hosted and participated in 22 national and international conference proceedings, organised 23 lunchtime webinars, 15 workshops and events, and published 4 policy briefs, although that should say 5 since we published one just last night, which my colleague Stijn will talk to in the following sections. But as you can see, that we've tried to use a kind of a policy engagement strategy that uses both proactive and reactive policy engagement methods, knowing that actually the policy landscape, whether it's in the UK or internationally, it's complicated, it's not linear, and using a mix of policy engagement methods, whether that's consultations or policy briefs or something a bit more proactive like events where we can actually draw people in and have those discussions and have them around the table with us, that's proved to be really effective. Some of the key impacts, I'm a little over time, so I'll just run through these slides really quickly. So some of the key impacts from shaping policy have been around kind of providing oral evidence to inform the Scottish Circular Economy Scotland Bill, which Dr. Fea Lesniewska from the University of Surrey provided. We've also provided evidence to the Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology on their briefing for planning and net zero, and our recommendations were cited 3 times, calling for reforms, and this briefing has been shared with parliamentarians and MPs, and also available to read for kind of everyone, for general members of the public as well. We've also hosted a number of knowledge exchange events as part of the as part of the Festival of Engineering here at UCL, also a Futures Forum, looking at kind of the actions that need to happen to advance the circular economy in the construction sector. And that was attended by members of kind of government and other government departments as well. And we've also hosted research showcases because the kind of incredible researchers at ISEC have done a tremendous amount of work, and it's really important to actually showcase what has been done, and these have been great at doing that. Lastly, we've also kind of wanted to produce accessible outputs for policy audiences. We're kind of aware that the subject matter when it comes to kind of circular economy and construction materials, it's not often kind of accessible or might not be understood by people without technical expertise. And our aim has really been to kind of demystify what circular construction is, demystify mineral-based construction materials, and create outputs such as policy briefs, blogs, opinion pieces, kind of films and documentaries about it that can showcase the work that we've been doing, but in a way that can be understood by people that don't necessarily have that kind of technical knowledge or expertise. And very lastly, this is my kind of free last slide, I promise. Just to mention that there have been placements and secondments as part of the ISEC, and we've also participated in various industry groups and committees. And 30 more seconds, bonus slide. As we are at a policy webinar, I've pulled out some of the kind of key recommendations that I think would be important, and from some of our work that the ISEC MCM has done in terms of considering what would we want to see from policy going forward. The first would be around a lower rate of landfill tax, so at just £3 per tonne here in the UK. It's quite an ineffective deterrent for landfilling of inert materials, but perhaps if we had a higher rate, say above £100, that could be an effective deterrent for discouraging cheap disposal. Secondly, removing VAT from the cost of home and building refurbishments so we can actually incentivize reuse and adaptation, discourage demolition, instead of kind of building more homes, instead of seeing how we can already adapt the ones that we already have. Third is around nurturing and investing in a secondary material market, whether that's ensuring that we have the right infrastructure in place, such as places and market trading places where these building materials can be exchanged, or having material passports and QR codes that can actually track and help us to understand the origins and characteristics of these materials. Secondary material markets, definitely one up there. Number 4, mandating pre-development and pre-demolition audits, which I think London is already doing, but this might not be the case all across the country. So having these in place would really help to ensure that we can reuse building materials at the end of their life, and also reduce demolition where possible. And lastly, incentivize the implementation of eco-design principles and other ways to design out waste so that we can reduce the environmental impact of construction. And that's me done. Thank you so much for the opportunity. If you have any more questions or need any more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Aleyna. Now we've got Zhang all the way from China. Chi, are you ready to go? 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, but it's not in presenter mode.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Does it work now?
Yeah, there. Yep, got it.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Zhang from UCL, SAEC MCM, and SAE SRM. My presentation is about the alignment of UK circular economy policy for wood with the United Nations resource management system. This project collaborates with Stijn, Ewijk, Hari Krishnan Tusidas, and Julia Stegemann. The presentation will walk through the background, the research method, how it is applied, findings, and conclusion regarding the integration of UNRMS as a policy evaluation tool for the UK wood sector. So UNRMS has been used in energy, mining, and extractive industries, where it plays a crucial role in policy development, industrial capabilities, capital allocation, and resource classification. However, examples of UNRMS as a structured tool for assessing and improving policy system remain scarce. Additionally, its potential for wood sector remain largely unexplored. At the same time, UNRMS is inherently aligned with circular economy principles. This brings us to our case study, the UK wood sector, which presents a unique and compelling opportunities to test UNRMS in policy evaluation. So the UK is one of the world's largest consumer of wood, ranking as the third largest wood importer globally. However, this high import dependency, coupled with insufficient recycling, raises critical concerns about supply chain security, environmental sustainability, and the transition toward a circular economy. While the UK has a well-established forestry management system, the wood product lifecycle policy remains incomplete. Additionally, future wood demand in the UK is expected to increase, adding further pressure on this sector. So given these challenges, this study applies UNRMS as an analytical framework to identify regulatory gaps, propose policy improvements, and develop a generalizable methodology for evaluating material policy system. So we conduct a 4 steps method for UNRMS to access policy system. Firstly, policy identification. So we review all documents related to the topics in the scope of the study. So this study searches and reviews all policy documents related to wood circular economy in the UK. This searching method combines the keyword searching and the snowballing to ensure the comprehensiveness of the results. Then is the UNRMS evaluation. Among the
Gee, I don't know about everybody else, but I can't hear you anymore. We've lost your sound.
Yeah,
sorry.
same here. Oh, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
If you can. Sorry. So I'm talking about the UNRMS evaluation. It's the second step of my method. So the UNRMS evaluation, among the principles and the requirements of UNRMS, select the ones that meet the research objectives. So the selection should focus primarily on the choice of the requirements. Use the selected requirements to evaluate the policy system summarized in step 1 and identify missing requirements. Then the third step is the expert interview. This method applies semi-structured interviews that involve experts from industry, industrial associations, government departments, international organizations, and academia to analyze the results from step 2 and provide their own perspective on improving the system. The first step is the final analysis. The previous results were summarized and analyzed by thematic analysis to discover the challenges and opportunities in the system. Then to the application of the method. Firstly, we review the UK's wood circular economy policy system. There are 30 policy documents which were relevant in the UK after screening. Then the relevant principles and requirements are selected. that 47 requirements in the 12 principles are related to this topic. We apply a traffic light system to show the evaluation results. So green color is addressed, yellow color is partially addressed, red color is missing, and the white is non-existent or excluded requirements. So after the evaluation, the UK's wood circular economy policy system addressed 24 requirements, and 13 partially addressed and 10 unaddressed requirements. So we can see that the UK wood system does well in the principles like social engagement, in circularity and transparency, but need to be improved in responsibility to the planet and integrated management of resources. Then we conducted more than 15 semi-structured interviews with stakeholders from different areas and 1 hour each. The interview questions comprised opening general questions, main body with questions tailored to each partially addressed and missing UNRMS requirements, and the closing questions. After that, we use thematic analysis to organize and analyze the interview contents. So from the interview transcripts, the challenges and the opportunities can be divided into system, governance, and technology. So the system challenges include cognitive limitations, economic constraints, the shortage of talents, and the system opportunities include economic incentives, education, and publicity. The governance challenges include lack of mandatory policies, policy fragmentation, and the governance opportunities include public procurement, cross-department collaboration. The technology challenges include the technical bottlenecks, information barriers, weak innovation drives, and the technology opportunities include digital transformation, circular wood innovation. So then to the final part, the conclusion. So the UK wood policy system has a solid regulatory foundation and aligns with key circularity principles like transparency and the waste hierarchy. But major gaps remain, like fragmented policies, poor data harmonization, and limited innovation and skills development. And the expert insights reveal deeper structural barriers, including conflicting incentives and slow digital transformation. So key actions needed, like create a national coordination platform, introduce circular economy incentives, and mandate tools such as LCA and green procurement. The hybrid UNRMS interweave approach offers not just solutions for the UK, but also a replicable framework for evaluating other resource sectors in other countries. Thank you for your listening. And if you have any questions, you can type in the chat and I will answer that.
Thank you very much indeed, Chi, also for keeping to time. We are running quite late. If the two remaining speakers keep to time, we're only going to have 5 minutes for discussion. So, Jonas, if you could show your screen, and hopefully we will have some time for discussion at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll try to stick with time. I guess you see my screen.
It's fine.
And start by saying I'm also from UCL, Jonas Breidenbach, research fellow, as initially introduced by you, Julia. Thank you so much. I am going to speak about what we were doing within the Future and project in the context of secondary raw material, and applying the UN framework, or UNFC, as it has already been introduced, to secondary timber recovery project. I also present on behalf of my colleagues who work with me on this project, Julia and Colin Rose. I am very happy that I don't have to spend a lot of time introducing the UNFC and can deep dive straight into the case study that we were working on in the past weeks and months about timber recovery project to produce high value engineered timber products, and kind of go straight into the topic with the first question we had to deal with about the material or raw material availability, the G-axis categorization and assessment. And if you can see on this first one, we had to understand what data sets are available around secondary timber in England or in the UK, and decided after a kind of long assessment to go for the waste data integrated data set, and more specifically the list of waste code 170201, which is secondary timber from construction and demolition waste. Ended up having approximately 800,000 tons a year of available material. Then we had to better understand what is actually within this material flow or this waste flow, and developed a sorting matrix to kind of better understand what is actually suitable for the recovery facility that we are aiming for to produce mass secondary timber products, such as glulam made from secondary timber or cross-laminated timber made from secondary timber. This was quite a longer process behind, but in summary, we can came to conclusion that about 17% is suitable for mass secondary timber manufacturing or production, and we end up with about 140,000 tons a year. Then there was the whole technology aspect and recovery rates within a facility environment, which we were looking at, and we had to start quite from the beginning of understanding the process within quite an innovative product recovery facility, and we noticed that the mass timber or mass secondary timber manufacturing process is actually fairly standardized within the timber industry, but we had to invest quite a bit into understanding the whole feedstock preparation process. Just as an example, that includes, if you have, maybe you remember Aleyna's picture on the back of a dropside van, there were some old pieces of wood. It's actually from our project, so we had to kind of figure out how the process would look like to remove metal fasteners, which would impede when it comes to machining these timber pieces, so they have to be removed, and also the surface has to be clean. So was quite a bit of lab experiments into developing these processes, and then analyzing recovery rates for those two subsets. And you can see here we have, for the first feedstock preparation, approximately 60%, which then goes on to mass secondary timber manufacturing, and we have approximately half of it then ending in the final product as an outflow. Now going on into the G-axis, or in the outflow, looking at the outflow, mass secondary timber is a fairly fresh, innovative product. So we didn't have so. Yes.
We're getting an sorry, we're getting an echo. I'm not sure if it's on your side or whether somebody is not sure.
Oof.
It only just started, so
Okay, hope.
it seems to be better now. So
Okay, just let me know and I'll see how it goes. So outflow, the material we are aiming for with our recovery facilities, a very innovative, kind of world premiere-ish product. So nobody's really doing that, and therefore we had to not only look into the whole kind of standardization question, but also understanding characteristics of this material. For those people who don't know kind of how CLT or cross-laminated timber looks like, that's a picture of materials we've produced in our labs in East London with materials or from demolition sites across Greater London we've collected and then assembled it to a structure, pallet structure we've exhibited in different occasions, among other at the London Design Festival last year. But what came out is that we have approximately the full potential in England would be about 40,000 tons of mass secondary timber products that could be produced based on this secondary timber inflow. And we were also looking at the E-axis, of course, the socio-economic viability and environmental viability of such a proposed recovery facility. And I've just picked out one example, which we were observing a bit more closer, and that's the whole certification process for the final product, which we noticed, and I've mentioned briefly that the standardization landscape in the UK for is mainly designed for primary timber, not for secondary timber. So that means the whole process of certification for a new innovative product is expected to be rather high and complex, which means this has an impact on the economic viability, but also an automation versus social viability question. So economic viability requires automation, and automation may impede with jobs that can be offered through the development or progress of, or kind of like raise of such a new industry. Overall, we classified the project as E32, F33, and G4. Means we are, and that's I think makes sense at the very early stage of this project. We have barely kind of get our first ideas of how the three axes can be classified, but we still need to get a lot more information. That's the current project classification. As you can see here, prospective project. Now, in conclusion, what we've learned so far is that data is critical to apply UNFC for anthropogenic resources, and it was in the case of secondary timber a limiting factor. There's not so much data available, or then, if so, in quite aggregated nature. The standardization landscape is designed for primary timber, which can be issue for market access of mass secondary timber. We have, from a G-axis perspective, to deal with the quite decentralized flows of materials, which might kind of create additional impacts. For example, on the approach it is manufactured. We have, from the technology perspective, currently a very labor-intensive manual workflow, which is considered as fairly kind of low on TRL level currently. And all this together also kind of impacts the economic and social and environmental viability. As I've mentioned before, there is this kind of like interaction between, for example, economic viability versus automation on a technical level, but also increasing, for example, recovery rates and therefore reducing environmental negative impact, or kind of have some environmental gains. And finally, just an overall statement, as I think unsurprisingly, we think that the UNFC has a unique ability to structure multidisciplinary evaluation across all different axes as mentioned and introduced in previous presentations as well. Here we go, that's me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jonas. Please put your questions in the chat, everyone. If we don't have time to discuss them today, we'll certainly get back to you. I'm sure the speakers will be happy to get back to you. So Stijn, please go ahead.
You are on mute, I think.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Stijn van Ewijk. I'm a lecturer in environmental engineering at UCL. And I'll be talking about use potential as a tool to support the UN RMS. So this is what use potential is. It's an assessment method that expresses how and to what extent a material might be used as a resource given enabling conditions, right? So it's a systematic approach to finding out what the potential is for circularity, and importantly, what conditions should be in place to actually make that happen. And as such, it's really meant to support decision-making, policy-making. So here's an example. This is an example for container glass, and I've created a simple table that might be the result of an use potential analysis. So you see current and potential use for both recycling and reuse. So let's start with recycling. We know that currently container glass, this is for the UK, is recycled at 38%, but we think it could be at 80%. And the way that could be done is by meeting the enabling conditions. And you see them there below. There's technological, economic, environmental, social, and regulatory conditions. And they probably sound somewhat familiar to you. If you're in this area, you know that these kinds of things are important to achieve higher recycling. So something like digital waste tracking, making sure the economics stack up. For the environmental side, something that's pointed out here is multi-compartment curbside collection so that you don't have additional truck runs and so no additional emissions. On the social side is effective sorting behavior, a critical element. And the regulatory requirement is really something that brings all these conditions together, that puts them in place. And that could typically be something like extended producer responsibility. So this is just an example, so don't quote me on these recommendations. This is just to illustrate how you might apply use potential to a specific problem, in this case, container glass. Now, if you're more ambitious, you might focus on reuse, which you see on the right-hand side, which is currently basically 0, but could be lifted to 10% if we had standardized design, if we made the economics work, if we had regional reverse logistics, if there was recognition of the benefits of reuse among users, and the policy that could put this in place could be something like a deposit return system. And credits here go to Lionel, who is also in this call, who did the empirical work here on container glass. But here it's just for illustrative purposes. Right, so what's important about use potential is that it recognizes the role of context. So no material, no product, including container glass, is by definition recyclable or reusable. It depends not just on the material, but also on the context. And the most important thing we can know about the context is how it should be improved in order to fulfill that potential. And that's why we focused on something called enabling conditions. That's why we set up the assessment method like that. So You focus on the characteristics of the situation, including the enabling conditions that would need to be in place to have the potential be fulfilled. So here's an example. What you see here is essentially a heap of rubble, and it depends only partly on the rubble itself whether we can recover that. It depends on a lot of contextual factors too, like national, local regulatory constraints, the cost difference with alternatives, the availability of processing technology, which is very sort of geographically constrained, the proximity to new construction projects that could use these resources, design preferences, the sort of new buildings, are they interested in these types of materials, and environmental conditions like, will it be exposed to water? And so do we have to worry more about contaminants, for example, in a new application? So these are conditions, these are contextual factors we want to capture when we talk about use potential. So the enabling conditions are meant to directly inform practical actions because they're additional to what's already happening. They express what needs to be achieved beyond the status quo. So an example is an operational cost reduction, preferably quantified so that we know how much of an incentive might be necessary. But it could also be application of pollution control technology to make it environmentally sound, or maybe the availability of renewable electricity so that a new process is in fact clean when it uses energy. Right, so much of this will sound like the UNFC, and part of the purpose of this presentation is to do a comparison. So what you see here in these columns is on the left-hand side, the UNFC for anthropogenic resources, which Jonas just showed how you might apply that. And on the right-hand side, you see use potential. Now, the UNFC for anthropogenic resources, of course, started with the UNFC for primary resources, and it's sort of an expansion of that. Use potential had quite a different history. It started with analysis that Julia and I did of deficiencies in EU waste law. So we're coming at it from quite a different angle. So what the UNFC is now is a classification scheme, whereas use potential is more of a decision heuristic. It's more flexible. It's not meant to constrain you very much, but help you look for the most relevant factors. So we're not seeking to like very highly standardize it in the future. The purpose of UNFC is to evaluate feasibility of recovering anthropogenic resources under project phase dependent conditions, and use potential similarly focuses on feasibility, but related to these hypothetical enabling conditions. Importantly, UNFC is about a project. Use potential focuses on materials or products. Now, in both cases, there are sets of criteria that are actually quite well aligned. So you heard already from Jonas and from Julia regarding technical feasibility, degrees of confidence, and environment, socio-economic viability for the UNFC. For use potential, we focus on the fairly traditional list, which you hear in a lot of analysis: technological, economic, environmental, social, regulatory, right? Policymakers already work a lot with these 5 terms. Sub-criteria in the UNFC are called controlling factors related to realm of discourse. Use potential similarly is context dependent. So we think that the focus of your search for enabling conditions should be context dependent, because it really depends on the material or product what might actually be important. Now, finally, the UNFC for anthropogenic resources, of course, focuses on secondary resources, but the whole system of the UNFC is meant to cover the full life cycle. Use potential is meant to be applicable to any part of the life cycle. Preferably, of course, people apply it early on in the life cycle so that they think through the use potential of a material for its whole life cycle, or the multiple cycles that might still be possible. So applying use potential requires data generation. This is absolutely critical. You see the sequence here of going from data essentially to policy implementation. So to assess use potential, you need to know product and waste properties, current performance and conditions, for example, current recycling rates, and you need sort of case study material or comparisons or modeling to find out what the potential could be, what could be achieved in the future. Then that needs to be formulated as a clear use potential. So it should say how and to what extent a material might be used as a resource, given which enabling conditions, and that can be used then in product and waste law that can seek to ensure that products and waste are used to their full potential, basically by implementing those enabling conditions, and hopefully in the process of making policy, generating the data that's required to assess again how well we're doing on fulfilling these potentials, allowing further analysis and allowing continuous improvement. So here's a quick summary. We don't have a lot of time, but fortunately, yesterday we managed to finalize a policy brief on this topic. So if you would like to know more about use potential, then please have a look. There's a QR code there. This policy brief explains the concept of use potential and also how it's relevant to policy making for the circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stijn, and thank you to all our speakers. We only have 3 minutes of our scheduled time left. And so I think there's a question here from Camille Janssen, or it's actually 3 questions to Erkki. So maybe we'll take those, and then if there are any other questions, do put them in the chat, and the speakers will get back to you. Camille, do you want to, rather than have me trying to decide which of your questions to ask, do you want to ask it? Are you still there? Maybe Camille is not still there.
Yeah, I'm still there, but
you're still there.
I'm in the room,
Yeah.
so I can't speak that much. But I think the first question, I think that's the important question, and I hope he has an answer on it. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the question was is Finland's goal to build with wood, or is it goal to build low environmental impact or in circular way, with wood being one of the suitable means to achieve that? Well, nowadays it's more about, because it was combined as a solution for climate policy, there is more environmental aspects. Originally during the 90s, it was more about finding innovative ways to use wood, and it was also kind of objective from the agrarian party, center party. So it was more about kind of bringing livelihood to rural areas. So now it's more about kind of sustainability aspects, and yeah. And for the
We don't have time. I mean, I think what I'd like to suggest is that we close the session now. I'd like to thank all of the speakers very much, and especially the lovely UCL research group, but also especially the guest speakers. So everyone did a great job. It was very interesting. And I also just want to remind you that the second part of the webinar, which is on evidence for sustainable resource management, is next Tuesday, also at noon, and we hope to see you there. So those who can stay are welcome to stay, and perhaps we'll have maybe 10 minutes or so of continued discussion. Yeah, okay, nobody's leaving, that's good. All right, do you want to go on, Erkki, with you? I think this whole thing of the plot handover is a technique that I have not previously seen anywhere. So I'm interested in your answers to these questions, and I'm also interested to hear from the others who are present of whether they've seen this particular technique used in other countries. But maybe go on with the questions from Camille first.
All right, yeah. The second one is a bit easy, is the life cycle assessment used in this type of tenders? I think not. I believe that cities don't have expertise for that, and I'm not sure if the construction companies are either. The third question was really, really good. How do you ensure that each tender is not slightly different, forcing producers of sustainable products to adapt to new criteria every time, making it difficult for them to invest in the long term? Well, begin with there's a kind of longer story in this, as this was a part of the kind of the city's circular economy policy, and kind of the situation that they didn't really knew what are the capabilities of the construction companies kind of deliver circular economy solutions. So this was kind of the way for the city to get the information about what the construction companies could actually do, and also provide them with the opportunity, as I told, kind of the shield from the normal market pressures. And yeah, I would say that. So this is quite initial thing, and well, this was just a single building in a single city, but afterwards I think there's 2 of these type of tenders as well. But the key thing was kind of get the information to the cities, and also got to help the construction companies to build their capabilities. But of course, in the future, that could be a problem if kind of the concepts are same type and they're not innovative or innovating anymore. But yeah, that's maybe more for the future.
I think my question was sort of maybe a continuation or a slightly different aspect of that, because it's what you said about the capabilities of the construction companies. How could you, I mean, was the plot handover, so you had criteria, so I guess was there a minimum threshold, but there was also scoring so they could exceed. Is that right? So the plot handover was going to happen regardless. So if the capabilities of the construction companies were not that high, do you know? I just wondered how you sort of elevate the ambition for something like this.
Yeah, what the city said was that exactly that they didn't didn't have in this competition minimum requirements or kind of the numeric requirements, so just the kind of the more qualitative. So that would leave more room kind of the companies to figure out their way to kind of submit their concept. And also because this was open competition, and so of course the companies would download the other companies' concepts and kind of see what's the situation in the competitive companies is as well. Yeah. And your earlier question about this type of plot handovers used in other countries, I'm not that sure, but kind of the speciality of the Finnish system is that the municipalities have kind of the zoning monopoly. It's got a quintessential part of their kind of the political authority, and also the major owners of land as well. What I heard, that's not the case here, for example.
Yeah. Is anybody else aware of any other examples like this? No. So do we have any other questions? I noticed Gladys Bustos had a comment, I think, rather than a question. I don't know, Gladys is showing us on hold, so perhaps she's not here at the moment. Do we have any other questions, in fact? No, we're good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and I'll hope we'll see you next week, especially those of you who are speaking next week. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Have a good afternoon. Take care.